For decades, Audrey Hepburn was presented as something untouchable, grace without effort, beauty without consequence, elegance without pain. The world memorized her smile, her posture, her silence, and assumed that behind it all was a life just as perfect. But long after the cameras stopped rolling, her son began telling a very different story. Not to destroy the myth, but to explain it. And once you hear what he confirmed about Audrey Hepburn, the image we held onto for so long becomes impossible to see the same way again. The childhood that shaped everything. To understand what Audrey Hepburn became, her son insists you have to start far earlier than Hollywood ever did. Audrey Hepburn was born on May 4, 1929, in Brussels, Belgium, into a family that appeared privileged on the surface. Her father, Joseph Victor Anthony Ruston, was a British banker. Her mother, Ella van Heemstra, was a Dutch baroness. They traveled across Europe. Audrey learned multiple languages at an early age. From the outside, it looked like security, culture, and opportunity. But inside the home, stability was already cracking. When Audrey was 6 years old, her father abruptly left the family. There was no explanation that a child could understand, no emotional closure, no gradual distance. He was simply gone. Audrey would later describe this moment as one of the great traumas of her life, a wound she never fully healed from. According to her son, this abandonment quietly shaped everything that followed. Her fear of being left, her need for emotional control, and her lifelong search for stability in relationships. The emotional damage didn't exist in isolation. After her father's departure, the family's financial situation deteriorated. Audrey witnessed her mother's grief and stress firsthand. The once comfortable life narrowed, and the household became heavy with unspoken pain. Then, just as that loss settled in, history intervened again. When World War II began, Audrey and her mother moved to the Netherlands, believing the country's neutrality would keep them safe. That assumption collapsed when Nazi forces invaded. Audrey was still a child when occupation set in, and those years would mark her permanently. Food shortages became severe. Hunger became constant. According to her son, what later generations admired as her slender frame was, in truth, the result of prolonged starvation. During the Dutch hunger winter, Audrey survived on whatever was available, including tulip bulbs. She became dangerously underweight, and the malnutrition affected her body for the rest of her life. But the physical damage was only part of it. Audrey witnessed neighbors disappear, families torn apart, and fear becoming routine. She lived with the awareness that survival was uncertain and fragile. Even as a teenager, Audrey did not remain passive. She participated quietly in the Dutch resistance, dancing in secret performances to raise money and acting as a courier, delivering messages hidden in her shoes. These acts were dangerous, silent, and uncelebrated, but they reveal something essential. From a young age, Audrey learned discipline, restraint, and endurance. She learned to suffer quietly, and according to her son, this was the foundation of the grace the world later mistook as effortless. This is where the confirmation begins. Audrey Hepburn's elegance was not a natural gift wrapped in privilege. It was a survival mechanism, built from loss, hunger, fear, and emotional restraint. The myth began much later. The pain came first. The dream that was taken from her. Before Audrey Hepburn ever stood in front of a camera, she believed her life would belong to ballet. Dance was not a hobby for her. It was identity, discipline, and escape. Even during the war, when food was scarce and fear was constant, Audrey trained whenever she could. Ballet gave her structure in a world that had none, and for a child who had already lost her father and her sense of safety, that structure mattered deeply. After the war ended, Audrey tried to reclaim the future she had imagined. She returned to formal ballet training in the Netherlands under respected instructors, determined to become a professional dancer. But the damage done by years of starvation could not be undone. Her body had been weakened permanently. She suffered from anemia and chronic fatigue, conditions directly linked to the malnutrition she endured during the occupation. Her ambition eventually took her to London, where she studied under Marie Rambert, one of the most influential ballet teachers of the time. Audrey worked relentlessly, believing that effort could overcome limitation. Instead, she was given a verdict that quietly ended everything she had prepared for. She was told that she did not have the physical strength required for top-level ballet, and that her height and build placed her at a disadvantage. No dramatics, no cruelty, just a fact she could not argue with. According to her son, this rejection was devastating. Ballet had been her dream since childhood, shaped in silence during the war years, and now it was gone. Not because of lack of talent or commitment, but because her body had been permanently altered by survival itself. The irony was painful. The same endurance that kept her alive during the war had also taken away the career she loved most. Audrey did not collapse publicly. She adjusted. That ability, to absorb disappointment without spectacle, would later be mistaken for elegance. Acting entered her life not as a calling, but as a practical solution. She took small roles in British films and worked as a model to support herself. There was no glamour at this stage, only persistence. What her son confirms is critical. Audrey Hepburn did not pursue fame out of ambition. She adapted because she had to. Acting was not the dream she chased. It was the path that remained after the dream was taken from her. And that quiet loss stayed with her, even as the world later applauded her success. Fame arrived before she was ready for it. Audrey Hepburn did not enter Hollywood on her own terms. She was pulled into it. After years of small roles and financial uncertainty in Britain, a single opportunity changed everything. When she was cast as Princess Anne in Roman Holiday, Audrey was still largely unknown, emotionally guarded, and unsure of her place in the world. The role required innocence, warmth, and vulnerability, qualities she possessed naturally, but ones that came from lived experience rather than performance. The film became a phenomenon. Audrey's presence on screen felt different from anything audiences had seen before. She wasn't dramatic or seductive in the traditional sense. She was restrained, observant, and quietly expressive. Gregory Peck immediately recognized her impact and insisted that her name receive equal billing, an unusual move for a newcomer. Overnight, Audrey Hepburn became a global star. What her son later confirmed is that this sudden elevation created a deep internal disconnect. Audrey was celebrated for qualities she had developed to survive, not to perform. The composure, the softness, the controlled emotion. These were interpreted as elegance, when in reality they were habits formed in fear, loss, and discipline. The public assumed confidence. Audrey felt exposed. She won major awards for the role, including the Academy Award for Best Actress, but fame did not bring security. It brought pressure. Audrey had entered an industry that rewarded spectacle while she was built for restraint. According to her son, she never fully believed she belonged in Hollywood. She often felt out of place among louder personalities and more aggressive ambition. That sense of displacement followed her into later roles. When she played Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's, the contrast became sharper. Holly was glamorous, carefree, and unpredictable. But beneath that surface was loneliness and emotional instability. Audrey understood that character instinctively. She recognized the performance of freedom hiding vulnerability. The world fixated on the black dress and pearls. Audrey focused on the isolation, love, loss, and the fear she never outran. By the time Audrey Hepburn married Mel Ferrer, she was already a star, but emotionally she was still shaped by the child who had been left behind. Their relationship began with intensity and shared artistic ambition. They met through theater, connected quickly, and married soon after. On the surface, it looked like stability. In reality, it carried the same imbalance Audrey had been trying to escape since childhood. According to her son, Audrey wanted marriage to mean safety, permanence, loyalty, reassurance. But her marriage to Ferrer became complicated almost immediately. Audrey was deeply devoted, but the relationship was marked by control, tension, and emotional strain. Friends would later suggest that Ferrer exerted heavy influence over her career and personal choices. Audrey never publicly confirmed this, but she also never denied it. What she did speak about privately was far more painful. During this marriage, Audrey suffered repeated miscarriages. She lost pregnancies in quick succession, including one that occurred while she was filming under physically demanding conditions. According to her son, these losses affected her more deeply than anything else in her adult life, even more than her parents' divorce or her father's abandonment. She desperately wanted to be a mother, not for legacy, not for image, but because motherhood represented something she never had: unconditional presence. When her son Sean was born, it was not simply joy. It was relief, healing, and validation after years of silent grief. Sean later said that their bond was inseparable, shaped by the fact that she had nearly lost the chance to have him at all. Despite the birth of their son, Audrey's marriage did not stabilize. The emotional imbalance persisted, and after years of strain, the relationship ended. The divorce was quiet but painful, closing a chapter defined by devotion that was never fully returned. Audrey remarried, hoping for renewal. Her second marriage to Andrea Dotti initially offered warmth and optimism. They welcomed another son, Luca, and Audrey believed she had finally found balance between family and personal peace. But history repeated itself. Infidelity entered the marriage, distance grew, and once again, Audrey found herself absorbing disappointment in silence. The years she finally felt safe. After 2 marriages ended in disappointment, Audrey Hepburn no longer believed happiness had to follow a traditional structure. When she met Dutch actor Robert Wolders, she was cautious, emotionally guarded, and no longer chasing rescue through romance. What developed between them was not dramatic or intense. It was quiet, steady, and built on mutual respect, something Audrey had rarely experienced before. According to her son, this relationship marked the first time Audrey felt emotionally safe. Wolders did not compete with her fame, control her choices, or demand emotional performance. He allowed her to exist as she was, without correction. Audrey later described their years together as the happiest of her life, even referring to them as a marriage of the heart, despite never formalizing it legally. This period coincided with a profound shift in her priorities. Audrey gradually stepped away from acting, not because offers disappeared, but because she no longer needed validation from public admiration. Her center of gravity had moved inward. Motherhood became her defining role. Sean and Luca were not accessories to her life. They were the point of it. Her son recalled moments that revealed who Audrey truly was, away from the public narrative. She cried when he left for his first job, overwhelmed by pride and fear in equal measure. She took deep joy in making her children laugh, especially when that laughter came from the belly. Unrestrained, real. According to Sean, being able to make his mother laugh that way was one of the greatest gifts he carried forward. Audrey's private life was intentionally modest. She loved gardening at her home in Switzerland, describing it as an act of hope, planting seeds without demanding immediate results. She spoke multiple languages fluently and continued reading obsessively, surrounding herself with books rather than trophies. She sketched quietly, gave drawings as gifts, and found comfort in routine. What her son finally confirmed. In the final chapter of Audrey Hepburn's life, everything she had endured began to make sense, not as tragedy for its own sake, but as preparation. When she accepted the role of UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, it was not a symbolic gesture or a late career pivot. According to her son, it was the most honest expression of who she had always been. Audrey did not approach humanitarian work as a celebrity lending her name. She approached it as someone who understood hunger, fear, and powerlessness from the inside. She had been one of those children once. During the war, she had relied on aid to survive. Now, she felt a moral responsibility to give back, not abstractly, but physically. She traveled repeatedly to regions suffering from famine and conflict, including Ethiopia, Sudan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and eventually Somalia. One of the most dangerous missions UNICEF had undertaken at the time. Her son later explained that these journeys were not easy for her body. She was already fragile and the conditions were harsh. But Audrey refused to scale back. She insisted on meeting children face to face, holding them, listening, and witnessing their reality firsthand. For her, compassion required presence. After returning from Somalia, Audrey began experiencing severe abdominal pain. Medical examinations eventually revealed a rare form of cancer, pseudomyxoma peritoni. The diagnosis came late. The disease had been spreading silently. Surgery and treatment could slow it, but not stop it. According to Robert Wolders, Audrey was not afraid of dying. What frightened her was pain, and the idea of being unable to continue helping others. One of her greatest regrets during her illness was that she could no longer travel for UNICEF. As her condition worsened, Audrey expressed one final wish: to spend Christmas at home in Switzerland. Commercial travel was impossible, but her close friend Hubert de Givenchy arranged a private flight so she could return safely. That Christmas, surrounded by her sons, her partner, and those she loved, Audrey called it the most beautiful Christmas of her life. Even then, she thought of others first, gifting winter coats and asking people to think of her when they wore them. Audrey Hepburn passed away peacefully in her sleep on January 20th, at the age of 63. So now that you know what Audrey Hepburn's son has confirmed about who she really was, does her story feel more inspiring or more heartbreaking to you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more true stories behind the legends we thought we knew, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us.